Hey everyone, James Labrie from Dream Theater, and you're listening to or watching the podcast Talking into Infinity with JT and Brian. Enjoy this. These guys are extremely informative. I love their dialogue. I love their interpretation of the songs, who and what we are, what we were going after. They're very accurate in their interpretations and descriptions, and I just think this is a great show, and these guys are doing a stand-up stellar job. So once again, enjoy Talking into Infinity with JT and Brian.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Talking into Infinity, a Dream Theater-centric podcast. I'm your host, John. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and talkingintoinfinity.com. We are not on the CMSnetwork.com tonight because the CMS Network got a content strike, so God forbid we go live on their YouTube page. But anyway, thanks, YouTube, for that one. Anyhow, we are live at normally 4 locations every other Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you would like to catch video replays of the show, just go to our Facebook and YouTube pages, and usually the CMS Networks page. If you'd like to catch audio replays of the show, just Google Talking into Infinity Podcast, and we are pretty much on any platform that you can think of. So, as you could tell, the background is a little Van Halen-centric tonight, and there's a very good reason for that. So Brian is off. He is playing a playoff game with his street hockey team. So, yeah, Brian plays street hockey. He's not very good. He is about 64 years old, and he moves like it and plays like it. But, you know, everybody's got their vices. That happens to be one of his. So anyway, Brian is off playing street hockey. So I brought a guest host on with me tonight, and he's actually a longtime friend of mine. We both have played in the Cleveland music scene for 25 years plus or something, and we talk Van Halen a lot online and stuff when we see each other. We see each other at a lot of shows. He's a big Dream Theater guy, Mike Portnoy and all that. And a couple weeks ago, he made a Facebook post that said, well, I'm digging into Van Halen too, and I'm not really familiar with half of these songs. And I went, what the hell are you talking about? So I was messaging him like, what do you mean? And he said, I'm not really overly familiar with the Roth catalog. And I was like, we've been talking Van Halen for years. I never knew that. So he recently went down the Van Halen rabbit hole, and he really started digging into the Roth era for the first time, in depth. So I thought it'd be a good thing to discuss because those records, there's 7 of the Roth era records. Obviously, Different Kind of Truth was 2012. But prior to that, the last one that came out was obviously 1984. So it's not very often you get a kind of a fresh perspective on records of that age, especially records of that quality. So I thought I would bring him on. Without further ado, my very good friend, Mr. George Gomez. What's up, man?
Hey, dude. What's up?
Not too much, man. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. I know I had asked you if you would come on the show and do this with me at some point, and it happened to be a couple days ago. Some point is in 2 days.
So yeah, that works, dude. Totally works.
Awesome. Well, so as I said, you and I have, we've been buddies for 20 plus years or whatever, playing, in all the different venues in Cleveland here and stuff. But we've also talked a lot of Van Halen and Dream Theater and things like that. So we got a lot of, musical interests in common. So before we dig into the raw stuff, what was your introduction to Van Halen, period?
You know what? Funny story. It would be 1984. I think I got the tape because my parents were split at the time, but my dad had ordered from Columbia House. Send in a penny and get, so we had gotten a shipment from Columbia House at our apartment, and I was itching to open it. And I was like, man, I wonder what's in here. So I told my brother, hey, take this box, go in the room, lock the door, and I'll act like I couldn't get it away from you so we can see what's in the box. Totally set my brother up. He runs into the room, he starts opening the box, and I'm banging on the door like, hey, what are you doing? And
right.
And I want to say that one of the tapes that was in there was 1984. So my intro to Van Halen was 1984. I remember being at my dad's. It was nighttime, and I popped the tape into my cassette deck, and just that initial track, you hear the synths kicking, and I had like goosebumps. I'm like, ooh, what is this?
Yeah.
So that was my intro, was 1984. So I mean, that was, out of all the albums, that's the one I'm most familiar with, because that was the first Van Halen album I've ever heard.
Man, so that it's again, we got stuff in common, because that's my first introduction to the band as well. I've told the story a lot on the show that that was the album that I discovered rock music on. And so for me, it's like, not only one of my favorites, but it's not only introduction to Van Halen, but it's really my introduction to music. So it's literally the most influential record of my entire life. So just an absolute beast of an album, as we'll get into here in a little bit. But so to set up a little bit more of the background here. So you've been a fan for a long time, but like I said, you posted that post about Van Halen 2 a few weeks ago, and mentioned that you really had never gotten into the Roth stuff, really weren't familiar with it like you were with the Sammy stuff. So how did you go all these years of being a Van Halen fan and not going back and getting into half the catalog?
For the longest time, whenever I got into a band, it was whatever was out, and then I would go forward with it. And I never really went backwards to see where it came from. It wasn't until like the last few years where I would do a deep dive. Like, I know, was it last year, a year before that, I did that with Rush. Okay. I just started at the start and went through all the, went through the whole catalog. So I don't know. I was the same way with Metallica. My intro to Metallica was Injustice. Or actually, no, it was Master of Puppets, but the first Metallica album I owned was Justice.
Okay.
And then I slowly went backwards, but I don't know. I knew a lot of the hits. And then when I went backwards with this Van Halen catalog, I realized I knew Van Halen 1. I knew everything off of that. But after that, it was bits and pieces, but it was like all the hits, the stuff that you would hear on the radio or whatever. Like, I think the first time I heard Everybody Wants Some was on, I forget what movie it was. They had this little animated hamburger.
Better Off Dead.
I wasn't sure if it was Better Off Dead or One Crazy Summer, but that was the first time I heard that song.
Okay.
And I was like, oh shit, but yeah. And so yeah, Van Halen 2 had like, okay, Women and Children First was the same thing. Out of the Roth era, I would say the one that I was the most unfamiliar with would be Fair Warning.
Okay.
I think I knew like maybe 2 songs on there,
Okay.
But yeah, Van Halen 1, I realized, yeah, that one I knew I pretty much knew everything on Van Halen 1, but after that, it was little bits and pieces out of every album up until 1984.
Okay. Well, so our good buddy Kale has a question for you right off the rip. He says, so if you aren't overly familiar with the DLR material, does Top of the World expertly reusing the Jump intro still hit the same for you? Now, are you familiar with that factoid?
No.
So, yeah, the main riff to Top of the World is actually the outro riff to Jump. So if you listen to the outro, it's like dun 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 dun. So it does it like one time through, and then that's what he used as the basis for Top of the World.
Oh wow! Okay.
See, little things you'll learn tonight, man.
I'm a fan, but I'm not like a super fan. I mean, I love Van Halen, but yeah, these are the things I'm like, oh no shit, okay.
Yeah, that's
now that you pointed out, I'm like, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Next time you listen to Jump, you'll be like, holy crap, that's true. Robert Husted, good to see you, man. He says 1984 is one of the best Van Halen albums. I would completely agree. One of these times we should just rank the Van Halen albums. It'd be interesting to see where. I mean, obviously Van Halen 3 is going to be everyone's last place, but I don't know. I don't know
that album got shit on so bad, and it's really not a bad album.
Dude, I don't mind it, and I think it hasn't aged well, because when it came out, I liked it. I was like, okay, this is cool, and I caught a lot of crap for it. And as I've gone back to it over the years, I'm kind of like, it's not aging as well as some of the other stuff, So, Johan Alexanderson, good to see you, man. He says 5150 is my favorite. That is an excellent choice. I don't think you can really go wrong with any of the records. I mean, even if you're going to say Van Halen 3, I mean, Hendrickson may try and crush a different kind of truth, but he would be wrong.
Right.
So,
I mean, if anything, I would think, Diver Down was a pretty fluff album because it was, pretty much covers. But after watching that documentary, I realized why it was, why they went that route.
Yeah, dude, Eddie always said about that one, he said, I'd rather bomb with my own music than, be successful with somebody else's. And it's not wrong. I mean, there's, 5 covers on that damn record. So,
right.
So, all right. So let's just go through the, the chronology here of the Roth records and kind of get your take. Obviously, you said you are most familiar with Van Halen 1. So we'll start there, and then we'll really get into the ones that you don't have a lot of, familiarity with. So obviously Van Halen 1 not being your first introduction to the band. Mm-hmm. What did you think? Because it kind of worked that way for me too. Because I don't remember what the second record I got. I know I got 1984, and then it was 5150 because it came out, shortly after. But then I really started being able to buy my own music at that time, and Van Halen 1 was one of the first ones. Mm-hmm. So what were your initial impressions of Van Halen 1? Because obviously that record is known to fans as, like, especially the older generation, they're kind of like, to them that's like the holy grail. That was their first introduction to the band. It was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And, for people like you and I, we came into it, with a different perspective. We had heard later stuff. So what were your initial thoughts on Van Halen 1?
Now, like the first time I heard it or on the revisit?
Either time.
I couldn't tell you on the initial, but on the revisit, when I revisit, I decided, I'm going to listen to these albums, or I'm going to listen to them with a good, set of headphones on, so I could really hear what was going on in the mix and everything. And that's when I realized, like, wow, I'm like, different approach, where they had Eddie on the left-hand side, and his solos were coming on the right-hand side, unless he had no rhythm tracks going, then he was on the left-hand side. So I was noticing little audio things. I've always loved going back and listening to albums like on headset, on a good set of headphones, because then you can hear all the little nuggets and ear candy, as my buddy would call it, in the mix. Stuff that you won't hear if you're driving in the car because you got the ambient noise, or in the house with the stereo because you've got ambient noise going on. So to hear how they mixed it and the little things that they played with fading things back and forth. So, yeah. But I mean, it's a great album. It's got, all the songs. I love all the songs that are on that album. Because I go back to that and I realize I remember all these songs.
It's weird with that one because I think for me, I don't go back to that one a lot, not because of quality, but I think it's like everything just gets played to death. It's like I don't need to hear Jamie's Crying Again. I definitely don't need to hear Running with the Devil or stuff like that. And so, but yeah, you're so right about the quality. And I think one thing that always strikes me about that record is when first of all, it's a fantastic record. Obviously, that goes without saying. It's like one of the greatest debut albums in rock history, if not music history. But when you really dig into like the making of it and some of the behind the scenes, it's pretty incredible what went into that thing. Considering how raw the band really was. It was really just a bunch of kids getting in there and ripping. They've barely any studio experience. Eddie Van Halen didn't want to do overdubs. And that record has such an incredible energy to it. And, you mentioned listening in headphones. I like to do it that way too. And you can hear just all the little imperfections, and it just totally makes it. And there's such, man, oh man, there is such an energy to that one. Don't you think? They were never able to replicate it, I don't think.
Right. And that's, this is, we're talking about days before Pro Tools, and I'm not sure if they did live recordings. I've always been a fan of recording live and not piecing it together.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just love hearing, that natural sound in there. Nothing's been, no sound replacements. That's all him. When it comes to like, Alex, it's like that's all mic'd and that's him. It's that live drum sound that's not, before he started getting into the electronics and the triggers and all that.
Yep. Yeah, it's the tones on that one are just unbelievable. Todd Gatchell, he nails it. He says, they were live 1 or 2 takes. Yeah, they were such an immediate band, but they were so tight that they didn't need a ton of takes. The only thing that was glued together were Roth's vocal takes. Like, if you read Ted, I always pronounce that name wrong because it's like Ted Templeman, but Ted Templeman. If you read his book, and he talks a lot about tracking Roth and the fact that, you know, he was not a very good singer, which, I mean, we all know that. I mean, whatever your feelings on the Roth stuff is. But he said that they really had to get a whole bunch of takes and, you know, splice them together to get one composite vocal take, because he just wasn't a one take guy. And so that to me was pretty interesting. And it's like, that's one of the interesting factoids, you know, about the early years of the band, is that, you know, Ted admits that they had discussions about getting Sammy Hagar and Van Halen back in '77 because he was a great singer and Roth was not. And then Ted later says that it was a really good move on his part not to make that move, because he doesn't think Van Halen would have become what it was without Roth. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I believe me, I love all of it. I have the slightest preference for the Sammy era stuff. I'm a big Sammy guy. But I think I would agree with that opinion, because I just think that as much as Dave's shtick gets old, I think it was necessary. And, you know, and I don't even though musically they would have been better right out of the gate had Sammy been the vocalist, I don't think they would have achieved all the stuff that they achieved had he been the vocalist right off the bat. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, you got to think. I mean, a lot of bands, you know, they evolve, so they don't stay stale and stagnant. Some bands just have that same sound, and they just keep it. Where some bands, you can tell there's an evolution there, you know, with the sound, with everything else. I know I've liked every era of Van Halen, you know, and but when I went back to revisit, I come to realize, I'm like, you know, Roth, great frontman because he's a showman. He's a lunatic,
yeah,
you know, but he's a great showman. But after going back through and I'll see all this, it's like, you know what? I go Ross like that. To me, he gives off like I'm a lounge singer that wants to be a rock star vibe, you know, because he's got that. Hey, you know, you can kind of see him being in a lounge, you know, telling, hey, you know, tip your wait staff, and you know, and just seeing all the goofy little covers and sitting around smoking a cigarette with a glass of something in his hands, you know. But yeah.
So Johan Alexanderson brings something up. He corrected himself, you know, in another comment, but he brings something up that I kind of want to discuss real quick before we hit Van Halen 2. He says, "Ain't Talking About Love intro might be the best moment in the history of electric guitar." He later corrected himself and said eruption, of course. But this might be like a very controversial take. I was never a big fan of Ain't Talking About Love, even from the beginning. I get it. It was like, it's their Eddie was trying to make fun of punk tunes when he wrote it. But to me, it's just like, I mean, it's cool. And I honestly, for me, that one's not just because I've heard it a million times, I've sang it a million times. Like, I've just never been the biggest fan of that song. And I mean, it's good, but I like all the rest of the stuff on that album better. I mean, I literally would take any song on Van Halen 1 over Ain't Talking About Love. I mean, are you a big fan of that song? Like, pretty much the entire Van Halen universe is.
Yeah, no, I dig that song. It's kind of anthemic, you know. I mean, people hear that, you know, and they're going to react to it, you know.
I wonder if it is just the fact that I've played it and heard it so many times. Like, but I remember when I first got the record, I was like, okay, well, all right, that's cool, but it's not Atomic Punk, you know. It's not I'm the One. It's right. You know, it's not On Fire. So, you know, I mean, other people might bring up Little Dreamer, but I think Little Dreamer is cool as hell because it's a very dark kind of, you know, weird moment on that album. You know, that album's very ebullient and upbeat and everything, and then you got Little Dreamer. It's like, yeah, that's a little depressing. So, yeah, I don't know. I just, you know, whew, man. Yeah, Johan says, he says, love the song, but the intro is 1,000 times better than the rest of the song. All right. I mean, I'll say I like the intro because I can actually play it. One of the very few Van Halen things I can play on guitar. So all right. So moving on, we have Van Halen 2, and this is basically what started this whole thing for you a couple weeks ago. So, talk a little bit about that and like the realization as you're going through this album. Like, did you just pop in Van Halen 2 on the fly? Like, oh, I haven't heard this in a bit, or how did this all start with Van Halen 2 for you a couple weeks ago?
Well, I don't know. I kind of, you know, I wanted just to go through every once in a while. I get an itch to, like, you know, to just go through the catalog in chronological order, skipping any kind of like compilations or live albums. I just want to hear the studio stuff. Okay. So I don't know, it was just like, you know what, I'm gonna go through the Van Halen stuff because, you know, I don't know what made me want to do it, but I just, on a whim, just said, hey, let me go through the Van Halen stuff. Let me see what I did know, what I don't know, because I knew there was a few albums, that I don't own.
Okay.
So I'm like, yeah, let me go through it. And I know I didn't have it, so then I just went on Spotify. Anything that I didn't have, I'm just like, well, I'll just go on Spotify because I'll have them set in order, and I'll just go through. Even though I went out of order for one album, just because I was kind of, I was got on the road. I'm like, all right, let me just next album, and then I skipped.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So what having gone through it with headphones now and kind of rediscovered it, as it were, like what are your thoughts on Van Halen 2?
I could tell, same thing was going on. They kept with the whole, keeping Eddie on the left, and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's just like, and I went back through the catalog today, just the Roth stuff. Okay. Just to give it a second listen before, I came on with. So I went through everything, including the latest one. I just went just all Roth era stuff. Just to, I'm like, all right, I'm going to listen to it one more time, just see if there's anything I missed, But yeah, I mean, there's a lot on there that I realized, like, wow, I didn't know these songs until I decided to go back through. Yeah. I mean, I knew Dance the Night Away. I mean, everybody just knows that, Yeah. And then Beautiful Girls, I knew that one.
Yeah. To me, this record is like, this is going to be a terrible analogy, but it's the one that comes to mind first. And I hate these albums, but to me, it's almost like, a load and reload situation where they wrote a ton of songs and put the better ones on the first one and saved the rest of them for the second one. And and that's kind of what Van Halen 2 was. It was, they wrote a bunch of songs for the first record, and then they had a whole bunch of stuff written, and they basically the ones that were most complete, the ones they chose from. But Ted Templeman, he cherry picked the best ones for the first record. So Van Halen 2 is really kind of like what was left over, I would say, is a good way to phrase it. And which to me is amazing, because that record is like damn near as good as the first one. So, I mean, it just to have that. Can you imagine, like dude, you've written songs and stuff. We've done the original band thing, you and I. Can you imagine like when you're in your like late teens, early 20s, writing a pile of stuff that's so good that you can come back and use it for basically like what equates into like, I'd say 3.5 albums worth of stuff over 6 records, and just build this. I mean, could you imagine having like having to, you got to have a third album. Crap. Let me pull out these other 2 songs we didn't use, and they're like huge to the world. Like, could you imagine that?
Right. And you sat on them.
Yeah. I can't, that always blows my mind. And it's, we'll get to this later, but with a different kind of truth, the main complaint that people have is like, it's a bunch of old stuff. Like, yeah, but did you notice how good the old stuff was, for fuck's sake? Like, I mean, it was like, it was amazing. Why wouldn't you do it if you haven't used it? So
yeah, when we get to that, I have my thoughts on that, but when we get to that,
yeah, I actually went like, obviously I'm really familiar with the original Roth stuff, but for some reason they took a different kind of truth off the streaming services recently. I found that out by accident. I was trying to listen to it and it wasn't there. So I listened to it on a YouTube video. So it was cool. I did go through that today as well. But yeah, I mean, Van Halen 2. So what tracks to you kind of like stood out once you were going through this again? I know, like, for me, Women in Love is always a huge favorite. Somebody Get Me a Doctor, which that one's kind of like the hit that wasn't a hit, because Van Halen fans always go bonkers for that one. And this has got some really cool stuff on it. So which one stood out to you?
Yeah, that's somebody Give Me a Doctor. But then also, we've been listening to so much music that a lot of times you all hear something, but it also triggers another song or something else. So that it kind of gave me a little bit of that slow ride kind of vibe, just because some of the beats, and I'm like, okay,
yeah.
And my wife's guilty of that, because my wife sometimes, if I don't have the songs turned up loud enough and she has a little bit of hearing issues, she'll hear something and she goes, "Oh, is this that song?" She sings a totally different song. I'm like, "No, but I can hear where you're getting it from."
It's almost like a help.
So she's like, she's kind of like doing mashups on the fly.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, Kale says it, man. He says, Van Halen 2, the first album is a great debut, but this one really puts it all together brilliantly. Light Up the Sky is one of my favorite Van Halen deeper cuts. Yeah, that's definitely, man, oh man, that is, oh God. It's so much fun going back through this stuff, because I enjoy it so much, and I don't I try not to listen to it a ton. My wife always says, "You ruined Van Halen for me," because you listen to it all the time. Like, believe me, I don't listen to Van Halen as much as I actually want to listen to Van Halen. Same thing with Dream Theater. So, but yeah, I mean, this obviously, it's got Spanish Fly, which is like Eruption Part 2, but on acoustic. Like you say, you got the hits and everything. And the interesting thing to me for me, I should say, about Dance the Night Away is that as much as, like, if I never heard Running with the Devil or You Really Got Me Again, I'd be bummed out if I didn't hear Dance the Night Away again.
Really?
Something about that. Yeah. Something about that song is just so happy and upbeat, and it's just a total blast. And it's just the ultimate happy time song. So I really love that one, man. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that one. So,
okay.
All right. So moving on, we get to Women and Children First, which is the first record of all original stuff, and the first record to feature keyboards on a Van Halen record. Did you know that factoid?
Did not.
Yep. So the any of the Van Halen people watching would know this, but like my nerd friends, but. Yeah, that and the Cradle Will Rock is actually a Wurlitzer electric piano run through Ed's guitar rig.
Okay.
So, and it's like if you go and listen to that one on headphones, and then you'll notice it. But even with headphones, you're kind of like, unless you're really listening for it, it sounds pretty much guitar-ish.
Right.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So, obviously, the hit on this one was Everybody Wants Some. So we have that. So what were your impressions of this one going back into it? Because this is where the catalog starts getting, away from the major hits for a few records, because most of the time you're thinking of Van Halen 1, Van Halen 2 in 1984.
Yeah, like I knew the first two songs and that was it. And the Cradle Will Rock, Everybody Wants Some. And after that, I was like, oh, all right, I don't know any of this. Like I knew two songs and that was it.
So. As a whole, what were your thoughts about this record? Considering that this is basically kind of a fresh listen for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then of course listening to it for a second time, today I'm going over through everything. I'm like, okay, like I'm appreciating it more, because these are like they're pretty much like I said new to me, other than the first two songs, and I'm still listening to okay, yeah, they're still doing the same thing with the mixing. I'm like, all right, they haven't transitioned over yet to. Putting Eddie on both sides for everything. It's like, but it's still got that nice, live raw sound.
Yeah. And they branch out a little bit, they've got, Could This Be Magic? Like still sea shanty or whatever it's called. Like, they got that kind of thing going on. They got, Tora Tora's this like basically like speed punk type of thing. And, or Lost in Control, excuse me, Tora.
Yes, Lost in Control. That's when I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, they're just, that was very, had a real punk vibe to it. I'm like, what's going on here? I'm like, all right.
Yeah. It's so weird, man, the way they did that one. It's like I say, this is like it's interesting because the way that this one goes, and then we'll get to Fair Warning next, but how Diver Down is such a reaction to, I think, this record and the next one, because they do start getting kind of weird in spots. But, a song I want to talk about in particular is one of my all-time favorite Van Halen songs, and that is Romeo Delight. Where do you stand on Romeo Delight? That is the fourth song.
To be honest with you.
So that song just grooves to me. I mean, they use that as a show opener for a lot of years, and it's just, God, that song just goes. And it was like, the infamous version at the US Festival where David Lee Roth like, I forgot the fucking words.
Yeah, like, that was funny watching that. I'm like,
yeah,
I can't imagine. I'm like, you guys are early in your career and you're already forgetting words to your songs.
He was notorious for that, man. If you go back and listen to like old bootlegs and stuff, he's booting lyrics all the time. And even later, like on the later tours, I saw the the 07, the 2010, the 2012, and then the 2015 tours, and when they would play Chinatown, he absolutely shit the bed on that song every time. He blew the lyrics, he blew his cues, like he didn't know that song at all.
Wow.
He was a
tune too.
Yeah, dude, it's like such a great song, and he just, man, he would come in late and then sing a different, like he would just scat something because he didn't do the correct words, like it was
that lounge singer,
Oh. That's the one thing. Like, man, it's such a tired argument, but I don't care because it's my show and I can bring up a tired argument. You know, that's the one thing. Like everybody, like all these people that are, you know, I call them the Roth honks, because if you go on that Van Halen news desk website, vhnd.com, it's, you know, basically they get their information straight from the band pretty much, and now it's obviously mostly Wolfgang stuff now that Eddie's passed. But man, you go in those comment threads and it's a bunch of these just Roth apologists just talking about how he was always amazing. He's amazing now. He can do no wrong. I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you listening to? I mean, you can't. It's like, I mean, Van Halen's my favorite band, and I have no problem admitting that Roth is pretty shitty sometimes. And why some of these like apologists can't, why they can't get on board with that, I have no idea. So I don't know. It's just. It's
I mean, after going through the catalog, I went on YouTube and I was just watching some live videos and saw some of the older stuff. And I even saw the stuff that they when they did the shit with Jimmy Kimmel, you know. And I can see he was just kind of, you could see where he was kind of like stepping back and doing whatever. And just, you know, even when I saw the stuff that he did when he took the stage with like the Foo Fighters, you could tell that he just goes with the flow and just whatever comes out of his mouth, you know.
Yeah. Well, he's like he's got that attitude of, you know, he's always said, like, you know, Sammy puts on a great party, but I am the party. And it's like, yeah, but
he's so full of himself.
Yeah. And dude, he doesn't care what he sounds like or what he does. He's like, I'm David Lee Roth, and the fans will eat whatever shit sandwich I give him because I'm David Lee Roth. Like, he bought into all the press clippings about the him versus Sammy stuff, and it's just like, oh my God. It's just not. I mean, especially in the later years, he was terrible. I mean, he wasn't great, you know, in his heyday. But I will say that I think people that, you know, really don't like Roth, they I don't know if you've seen these comments, but they're like, oh, he sucked even back then. I'm like, I wouldn't say that. I mean, he was an 80s singer. A lot of those 80s guys did that goofy shit. They were all drunk and coked up on stage, and
right.
You know,
that's what I could imagine what happened right before they did Loss of Control. I'm thinking I can just see them all doing rails and saying, "All right, let's go, get the song in the studio."
Right.
And then that's what they got.
They doubled the BPM on it just with a few bumps. So Kale says, women and children first. Not a huge fan of this one. I like Loss of Control the most, In a Simple Rhyme and Growth more so, inspiring the Dream Theater meta album concept between Scenes from a Memory and Octavarium. Yeah, that's very true. And then they obviously did that on a few other records. I'm surprised, Kale, that Loss of Control is your favorite. I mean, this is a record that has, you know, like I say, Romeo Delight is just one of the best Van Halen songs ever recorded. Take Your Whiskey Home is absolutely kick-ass. Did you dig that one? The one on the backs I was just talking about, getting drunk? That is... I love the key changes in that one. And... It's just a simple, hey man, I got blasted, you know. Like it's just such a typical David Lee Roth, but it's so direct, man. I love it. And I mean, Kale, I will agree with you. In a Simple Rhyme, the album closer, that is a great song, George. Are you into that one?
I'm trying to remember which one that one was. Like I said, I mean, I pretty much shotgunned all these, you know, albums like between last week and then I went through it. I mean, went through all of them today, you know, between driving to work, back to work, and doing stuff around the house before the show started.
Yeah, that's the one that kind of starts out with like the drums like on the snare, like the snare rolls. He's like, back in the past, I was treated so coldly. So yeah, it's like very upbeat and catchy for this record, I think, because this is where they started to get darker. You know, it's weird. And I've said this on other podcasts, but like you can see when you really read the Van Halen history and you know like the behind the scenes of it. It really comes out in the music. Like you know, other bands I've studied, like they'll say, "Oh, well, this period in the band's history, they were happy or they were sad," but the music stays fairly consistent. With Van Halen, when you know the behind the scenes, you're just like, "Holy shit, it's right there! It's right there to see." And I think that this one, you know, starts down that darker path as Roth and Eddie start getting into things and start butting heads, and it really comes to a head on the next record, Fair Warning. And I'm really interested to get your opinion on this one because you said you knew it the least. You probably still know it the least. But to me, this is definitely my favorite Roth record, which is difficult for me to say because of how much 1984 influenced me. But this is a very dark record, and that's basically what everybody knows it as, is the dark Van Halen record, especially, you know, with Roth. So what did you think of this one? Because it is kind of a left turn into some vibes that they just never were known for, never got into.
Right. Yeah. And on this one, I knew Mean Streets and of course Unchained. I mean, who doesn't know Unchained?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
right.
fucking epic.
Yep.
But yeah, when I realized, I looked at the cover, I'm like, wow, I don't remember this cover, you know. But I just, like I said, 2 songs, but yeah, no, I dug it. Yeah, the other one that kind of stuck out was "So This Is Love."
Okay.
You know, to me, out of all the songs, I'm like, okay, you know, I mean, but I mean, I had to like laugh as I'm going through these on Spotify. I'm just like, wow, I'm like, all these albums, they're all a half hour long. That's it, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit. I mean, they were all short albums.
Yep. It's funny because I told my wife, like, we just bought a house about a half a year ago, and you know, I'm into the whole gotta mow the lawn thing, and we don't have a huge yard because most of the front yard's taken up by a vegetable garden, and I realized that I can literally get my entire front yard and backyard and the trimming done in the space of time that it takes to get through one David Lee Roth album, maybe plus 1 song. So it's like, I'm like, all right, so that's a pretty short, you know, period of time to mow. Mm-hmm. So Todd Gatchell says, "Push Comes to Shove is the best solo Edward ever put to tape." Man, Todd, that is a man. Okay, so I know, Todd, that you're a big Hot for Teacher guy. So are you saying that Push Comes to Shove is a better solo than Hot for Teacher? So let's just use that as an example. I mean, Panama would be up there for everybody, obviously. God, there's so many. I mean, Push Comes to Shove is great, though. It's also like, so where do you? Oh, there he is. He says by a mile. No shit. Wow. Well, I mean, admittedly, Todd, like the Hot for Teacher solo is basically what made me want to be a rock star. Like, I wanted to be Eddie Van Halen when I saw that, him walking down that table doing the solo in the Hot for Teacher video.
I mean, you didn't after seeing that video, dude. Come on.
I know. Like, I was like, man, like, I saw the Panama like, basically when I discovered Van Halen, I was like, holy shit, I love this. This is amazing. And then when I saw the Panama video, I was like, okay, I want to do that. Like, I'm so into this. Like, I want to play music. Like, I want to make people feel how I feel now. Well, then when I saw the Hot for Teacher video, I was like, okay, I want to be Eddie Van Halen. I want to be a rock star just shredding electric guitar. Like,
yeah, I think it was the first video by Van Halen that I've ever seen.
Was it? Yeah, it was.
So.
Oh my God. Yeah, mine was Panama. It was kind of interesting. Like, when my family first hooked up cable in 1984, the very first thing I did was turn on MTV to make sure we had it, and the first video that popped up was Panama. It just blew my mind. I was like, yes, it's meant to be.
Well, shit. I mean, my introduction to music videos was before I even moved into the burbs. It's a show I think called Friday Night Videos. And it didn't come on till like late. You know, you had probably maybe an hour of videos and stuff like that before. I mean, predates like MTV. I saw that. I saw videos on that before MTV.
Yeah. All right. So Cale McLeish is bringing up the song I wanted to bring up. Hear About It Later is absolutely my favorite here, simply because of the intro. That clean guitar tone alone is joy, but I love that melody so much. Cale, we don't always agree on this show, but we are agreeing 150% here. Hear About It Later is my favorite David Lee Roth era song, followed closely by, I might have to say, Top Jimmy. So, but yeah, Hear About It Later, dude, like, are you familiar with that? That it's on the, it's track 4. Okay. So, but this one is just, I think it's like one of the most criminally underrated Van Halen songs, because people just do not talk about it nearly enough, and it's just got such a killer melody, and I think it actually plays into my love of a song on A Different Kind of Truth that I'll mention when we get to that record. There's a song on there that I go bonkers for, and I think it's one of the best Van Halen songs ever on that record too. But in listening back to that song today, I realized it's kind of similar to Hear About It Later. And and Hear About It Later is kind of one of the more upbeat moments on this album. You've got that, and you've got, So This Is Love. So what are your thoughts on the different vibes? Like, do you more prefer the more happy time upbeat sort of stuff, or are you more, do you kind of prefer when they get a little dark and gritty and, Mean Streets-ish? Like, what
Right.
do you have a preference there?
No, I mean, but I like it when they, when they don't just stay on one vibe. They give you a little variety, kind of take you up and down a little bit.
Yep.
Back when people would plan out an album, they knew what they wanted to close the album with or whatever. Sometimes you can tell if you didn't look at the track list and make, this is the closing song. This is the last one that they threw in before they were done. But I like a little bit of a journey in there. But when it makes sense, because we all have those albums that, like, if you hear the song on the radio, but it's just the song on the radio, but that next, and you're waiting for that next one to hit, but it's the radio, so you're not going to hear that next song.
Yeah.
There's plenty of albums that I have like that, like, in my head, the next song's already starting, even though it's not.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think this is kind of I don't really want to say polarizing record, because I think that's a little strong of a term, but in terms of the Van Halen fan base, like the hardcore Van Halen fans, I think Todd can speak to this as well. The hardcore Van Halen fans really gravitate towards this record, whereas the more casual fans, this is the record that, it's it's the least successful of the Roth albums, and so like the more casual Van Halen fans kind of they don't like this one because they want their beautiful girls, they want their jump and stuff like that, and there's none of that to be found here, almost none anyway.
Right.
And so I fall into the camp of this record being absolutely brilliant. And it's always funny to me because something interesting about this album to me is that it gets really weird, because you've got the first side, the first 4 or 5 songs are straight up tunes. Well, then all of a sudden you've got this weird reggae thing. You're like, what the hell is that? Then you got So This Is Love, which is like kind of like, that shuffle type of thing. And then you've got, Sunday Afternoon in the Park, the synth thing, and then One Foot Out the Door. Like, so really a good 35% of this album is really weird. So, but I think it's cool in its originality. You know what I mean? So, Todd does agree. I figured he would. He says, agreed, this is the one. However, a different kind of truth is a close damn second. See, me and Todd are quickly becoming best friends here. I don't know, but I don't know about close second, Todd, but Brian and I, my co-host, he hates that record, and we're going to do an episode about that because I'm just going to skewer him for that. I do not understand why he hates it, but so anyway, as I mentioned earlier, I think as you see Van Halen start going down the dark path, it starts on, not to make a Star Wars reference, it starts on Women and Children first, and then definitely is on full display, for Fair Warning. Eddie was pissed off; he's considering quitting the band and all this kind of stuff. All of a sudden, you get the next record, which is Diver Down. And this really was Ted Templeman and David Lee Roth kind of going, look, Van Halen fans don't want to hear morose, pissed off Van Halen. They want to, drive down the street in their convertible with, hot chicks around them and stuff like that. And so they're like, we need to go back to the fun stuff, this, that, and the other. And because, there wasn't like a huge hit on Women and Children First and Fair Warning, they're like, all right, we need a hit. So they went back to the well of You Really Got Me. And they wanted to find cover tunes to try and do. But yeah, this one, are you familiar with like the recording process on this one and how this album came around? Because it's kind of an interesting story.
I remember. I've always known about this album because who doesn't know that cover? But no, I don't know the story behind it.
So this was kind of like they were tired of the album tour kind of cycle, and they wanted a break to take some time to really craft some great songs, really take their time on a record, because they had done the at least the first 3 pretty quickly. They took a little bit more time on Fair Warning, but they didn't want to leave the public eye because they were still selling a lot of records and a lot of concert tickets. So to keep the public interested and say, hey, we're still here, they decided they're just going to do a cover and put out like a single. And originally, from what I understand, they wanted, Dave wanted to do Dancing in the Streets, and Eddie couldn't get anything with the riff going. And so he's like, what about Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison? And so they did it, and then all of a sudden it blew up on radio, and everybody's like, holy shit. So the label's like, okay, we need a new Van Halen record. And they're like, God damn it. So they had to go in, and this was the first 4 were in Sunset Sound, and then this one was Amigo Studios, and they had to rush out an album, which is kind of another reason why there's a lot of covers on this one, because they had to get it out so quickly. But where do you stand on this one? Because this is another one, like, fans either kind of really like it or really don't like it, and it is kind of, with all the cover songs, it's kind of it's really like if Fair Warning is dark, then Diver Down is light. So what do you think about this one?
Right. Yeah, this one, like I said, this was what I would consider the fluff album,
Okay. That's a good assessment.
With all the covers. This is where, this is where the lounge singer really shines, because like, hey, I'm getting to do all the cover songs, and
right.
I wouldn't call it a bad album, but it's just, but it's so many covers, like it's majority covers, but I didn't hate it. I still dug it, because I always dig, when a band will do a cover. And it's funny because, like, as you get older and listen to other bands, like, you go back and go, holy shit, I didn't know that this band that I liked back in the day, that song was a cover. I did that with Metallica, with some of these songs, because they were kind of obscure, and you didn't know they were covers. I do that with my wife. I'm like, she's like, oh, hear this song. Okay, yeah, that's a cover. Really? I'm like, yeah. But I didn't have the musical knowledge back then to know, that some of these songs. This was kind of like almost like the equivalent of the Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Covers album, except for this one had originals on it.
Yeah. Okay. So
Logan Brandon, I dig a good cover. Don't get me wrong. I dig a good cover. I didn't think it was a shit album.
The thing to me about the covers was, like, I learned years later how many covers were on this, but I think at that point David Lee Roth had gotten weird enough, like you were familiar enough with his personality where I thought he wrote this stuff. As a kid, I'm like, I could see David Lee Roth writing Big Bad Bill and, all that kind of thing. So it's like, so that was interesting to me, because I was like, wow, these are covers. Okay. Logan Brannigan says, I'm not a huge fan of Diver Down, but it still has some good stuff. It's home to some really cool instrumentals. Yes, definitely agree. Secrets has some great, amazing, like, shimmery guitar tones. Obviously, Cathedral's on here. Any guitar player worth the salt knows Cathedral.
Yeah, Cathedral's pretty cool.
So that's badass.
Little guitars.
Yeah. See, Kale, man, he's getting on my good side. He must have some bad takes on something we're doing coming up, because I think he's trying to butter me up here. He says, all right, Diver Down, man, there's some real clunkers here. That said, Hang 'em High is hugely cool, but Little Guitars, including the intro, is actually one of my favorite songs of them all. Kale, same here. This Little Guitars is a huge standout for me. I love it, man. I absolutely love that song. It's definitely one of their best. And again, I think it's a little underrated. I think, like, the casual fans don't really talk about that song enough, because it's just so catchy and upbeat, and it's like the total happy time, Todd Gatchell says, fun record. Little Guitars is great. The Full Bug is a banger. Jan Van Halen getting on a Van Halen record is cool too. So yeah, did you know that little factoid, that the clarinet player on Big Bad Bill was Eddie and Al's dad? Yep. And he was missing a finger. So yeah, he actually was playing clarinet. If I remember right, it was without his pinky? This would be some great Van Halen trivia. I should know it. I forget if it's his pinky or his ring finger. One of the two. If any of you guys in the chat know that, let me know. I'm drawing a blank.
Like
as to
missing
which
the
finger,
entire finger, or
yeah. He
like
basically couldn't
toenail,
play.
was just missing a knuckle,
Yeah, no, exactly. No, he couldn't play the clarinet with it, so he hadn't played in a bit, and so they got him on there, and they were just in a room jamming on it. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, this is this is a good record. Again, I don't think there's a bad Van Halen record. I think if I'm ranking the Roth records, this one would be lower down. But again, I think, like you said, it's just because of the covers, and also it's like you said, it's very, very short. The other records are.
It's still this one's still 30. It's what 31 minutes. So we're still in the 30-minute time frame. Every record up to this point have all been like 30, 31, 32 minutes.
Yeah, but this one has more tracks. So it feels like everything's, like, even the songs themselves are kind of short. Whereas at least before, like, it's, the songs were a little bit longer. It felt like there's a little more meat on the bone, I guess, is a way to phrase it.
And I would say out of all the songs that are on here, for me, I would say that Dancing in the Streets was the that was the corniest one that was on that album, if you ask me.
Yeah, Todd says, I didn't know that about the finger. Cool, I learned stuff. That's what we do here. We're morons on Talking Into Infinity, but we do educate here and there. So, yeah, well, I mean, Dancing in the Streets, basically Eddie was working on that key pattern for something of his own, and Roth heard it and was like, "Nah, man, we can use that for Dancing in the Streets." So that's why Eddie like hates that song, because they basically stole an original riff of his to glue it onto the song he didn't want to do in the first place. So that was kind of, All right. So let's move on to the album that turned Eddie Van Halen into basically, the master of his own, master of his own fate. The record that the first record he recorded at his home studio, 5150. And as we talked about at the beginning of the show, basically me and you discovered Van Halen through this record. That is, of course, 1984. And dude, talk a little bit about this record. Give your impressions of it, because obviously you have a lot of familiarity with this.
Right. Well, I mean, being that this was my my intro, it's always been my favorite. So it's almost like that that first child or whatever. It just like this was my intro to Van Halen. I know all these songs that front to back. I love the album front to back. Everything on there. I mean, being a drummer, I just love listening to Alex and what he does in the songs. And I mean, I remember just. The first time I heard Hot for Teacher, and I'm like, wait, how the hell is he doing that? It's like, holy shit. It's like, I couldn't replicate it. I tried. I mean, I used to put my headset on and I would jam to the record. I mean, I loved it, but I mean, for me, it's a phenomenal album just because, like I said, it was my intro and it just stuck with me. Cause I was like, holy, it's not like that drug. Like, oh, I got something really good. It's like, I love every track on this album,
Yeah, I completely agree, and
of course, now, and this is when they decided they got away from the old mixing style. Now they got Eddie on both sides. Everything's in stereo.
Yeah,
I mean, I love the sound of it. Like I said, from that first hit, it's like, oh wow, it's like it's got this really full sound to it.
Yeah, it's definitely the most mature, I think, of the Roth records, obviously.
Yes, it's more of a forward. Like it's less of David Lee Roth, the party animal. This is more David Lee Roth, the rock star. This is like more like this is like straight up. We're gonna hit you hard with some really good in your face rock.
Yeah, totally agree. It's funny you mentioned the Hot for Teacher intro, because again Ted Templeman says in his book, and I could never hear it until he actually explained it, but that intro is actually
like Lamborghini.
Yeah,
Alex's Lamborghini mixed in.
It was Eddie's Lamborghini, and he recorded the tailpipe of it, like just idling, and Ted Templeman and Don Landy had to go meticulously and blend it with Alex's drums to get it to be on the right time. It's just like, holy shit, man!
Yeah,
like,
watching that little doc, I was like, oh really? I'm like, no wonder it's
Yeah,
and it's funny because I saw something on Facebook, a reel, and it's this guy on his motorcycle, and it's like, yeah, if you know, and this guy's his motorcycle is running. I go, this sounds like Hot for Teacher, but then it cut over to like I think Meshuggah, I think Bleed or whatever. Like right. I go, no, dude, that's definitely Hot for Teacher. But
yeah, that's Hot for Teacher, bro.
Yeah, but I see how they related it to that Meshuggah, but I was like, no, but anybody who knows, I'm like, no, that's the first thing you think of is Hot for Teacher before anything else.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna ask you, and we'll keep talking about the record, but I mean, you're a drummer, so, and you just mentioned Alex is playing on Hot for Teacher and stuff, but I wanted to ask you this earlier. Talk a little bit about Alex as a drummer, because I play drums myself. I'm not as it's not my main instrument. Obviously, I sing, but I've played drums for a lot of years, and there's certain drummers where they're kind of difficult to replicate, and I think that Alex is one of them. Because he does some stuff that just absolutely grooves. That's just a natural part of his style. That's really difficult to replicate. So, I mean, for you as a drummer, like, talk a little bit about him and how unique his style is in a lot of spots.
Right. I mean, so a lot of times you just listen to stuff, and he just has a straightforward groove, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I mean, that's why you dig it. But until you actually sit down and really listen to it and try to play along to it, then you realize, holy crap, Just like, I mean, I showed you that video when I was trying to try out for that Van Halen band. I'm like, I didn't realize. I'm like, like Amsterdam. I didn't realize how difficult
Yeah.
the intro was. I'm like,
Yeah.
holy crap, what's he doing? And until I had a chance to sit down and analyze it and watch other people play it on YouTube, I'm like, no, this dude, he's got some stuff in his back pocket that's just sick. You know, some of the stuff that he does with his syncopations and all that, and you're listening. I'm like, okay, because he goes into this groove where he starts doing double bass, but then he's riding on the ride cymbal and throwing out little patterns, kind of like, you know, a la Neil Peart, where he's just got these little accents here and there. And I'm like, you know, and then I was like, when I was listening today, I'm listening going down, and he's grooving on that double bass, he's hitting on that ride cymbal, but then he's going back and forth between the snare and the toms, and I'm like, oh, I'd have to listen back a couple times, like, how could, you know, like, wow, I'm like, how, you know, and he just offshoots every once in a while, like, wait a minute, I mean, he's playing something, then he'll just throw a little ping, ping. I'm like, whoa, I'm like,
yeah.
I was like, holy shit. I mean, it's almost kind of like when you're trying to dissect, you know, like a Tool song, because I mean, the shit that, you know, he does, it's like, holy crap, you know. So yeah, I mean, he has a lot of stuff that's just straightforward, but then he's got some stuff that's like pretty intricate. That's like, holy shit, you know, as a musician, like that's, you know, that's badass. You know, when you listen to it, you're like, you want to try to replicate it, and you're like, wow. It's like, I want to go look up, like, I would love to see like drum cam footage of him playing to see how does he do that.
Right.
So I do that a lot. I look up a song like, hey, is there drum cam footage? I mean, yeah, you'll find a lot of guys covering it, and you don't know if they're doing it right. But I wanted to see, like, you know, I would love to see him, you know, and that's how I am a lot of times at concerts. If I'm in a small venue showing him up front, I'm watching the drummer most of the time. 9 times out of 10, if they got a really cool drummer, I'm usually watching him more than anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, dude, like I said, his style, you used the perfect word. It's the syncopation that he gets into. Like, he does some really unique stuff. And again, like you said, like, it sounds straight up, but then if you have to sit down and learn it, it's really messed up. I
mean, listen to House of Pain. Just in the beginning of that, it's like,
yeah.
Wait, I'm like, what's going? You're off trying to find that groove, and then it hits.
Yep.
You know, it's like it feels like everything's off, and then it lines back up again.
Yep. Well, even something as simple as like Panama, like he's like doing a but then there's all the stuff in between the you know, the downbeats, like, you know, the hits. It's like, what the hell, man? Like, you know, I mean, Johan Alexanderson says that he's like, Hot for Teacher is hard to beat, to be honest. Like, yeah, well, I mean, he's doing that, but with his right hand on the ride, he's doing triplets.
But yeah, then he's just like, he's doing those little triplets on there. It's like just riding on that ride. So I'm like, yeah, like the double bass stuff, that's that what they called the Alex Van Halen shuffle, because it was just that.
Yes.
It's not straight up double bass, but it's just a little bit of he's galloping basically.
Yeah,
but then he's doing, you know, he's got the doubles there, but he's got the triplets on the ride. But yeah,
all right,
I mean,
so
I would say for me, the real like grungy, dark, want to punch you in the face song, "We Drop Dead Legs." I just love the groove of that song. Just like, yeah, it's like, you know,
right. That's I will say, kind of like I you know, was a little controversial with "Ain't Talking About Love." I love Drop Dead Legs. I'm with you. I love the entire record. There's not a bad second on this record.
No, not at all. There's no clunkers on this album for sure.
Yeah. I really like Drop Dead Legs, don't get me wrong. But by the same token, I'm also kind of like, you know, everybody, like, it seems like the diehards really go bonkers for that song. And I'm thinking, dude, where's the love for Top Jimmy? Like, that song just is amazing. And it never gets talked about, man. It never, ever gets talked about. And, I mean, Drop Dead Legs is great. And you're right. I mean, that groove is... And I just love that outro solo, like how he rides, like when he goes, like it's just this obnoxious, like grabbing the guitar and just kind of like, it sounds like he's fighting it. Like, it's just so badass. Yeah, this record is just, you know, I think back all the time, and it's like, you know, as an 8-year-old kid who's never heard rock music before, it's not difficult to go back and understand why this grabbed me the way that it did, you know, especially then seeing the videos, because I mean the songs themselves were what did it to me, but then to see what the band looked like, you're just like, oh my God, like seeing Eddie Van Halen's guitar for the first time, like I've said it a million times, like for me it was like this when I was a little kid, and it will forever be like this for me. There are 2 bastions of cool in my life that will never be topped. It's Eddie in the Frankenstrat and Han Solo in the Millennium Falcon. That just, I just like, you know, they both, the first time I saw it blew my mind. I was like, there's nothing freaking cooler than that. And, But yeah, I mean, this album is just, and you want to talk about ear candy. I mean, this is one where if you listen to this with some headphones on, man, like you can hear some crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, again, having done research, I'm sure the documentary that we're talking about will mention that. And by the way, for those of you guys that don't know, there's a guy, I want to say that the YouTube channel is called The Tapes Archive.
Yeah.
But okay, I'm glad I got that right, so I'm not directing people to the wrong place. But yeah, this guy, he's a fan, but he did this 5-part documentary about 1984. And the first 2 parts are out, correct?
The first 2 parts are out. I think the next one drops either today or tomorrow.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, but anyways, guys, like, and I study all kinds of Van Halen shit. Like, I literally, like, I don't know if I've told the story on the show before, but I listen to so much Van Halen, so many audiobooks, and I've read so many interviews that one of those new books that came, I want to say was called Eruption, came out last year or the year before. I got the audiobook, and it's like 10 hours long, and I literally counted about 15 minutes worth of stuff that I didn't know. So it's like I study everything. And this 1984 documentary by this dude who does the Tapes Archive, holy shit, there's a ton of stuff I did not know. So
it's really good. I've enjoyed. I'm probably gonna go back through and watch the first 2 again.
Yeah,
just the stuff that you learned on this. Like, holy crap, it's pretty cool. I'm a big fan of documentaries. I love getting behind the scenes stuff and learning all the. I'm the guy that's got the DVD, and I like to watch all the behind the scenes stuff. What went into this.
Yep. It's funny because like. I'm such a nerd for that my brother and I, we host a Star Wars podcast, and the first Star Wars trivia contest that we entered, we ended up winning on the last question of the final round because it was like worth a whole bunch of points because it was a category only about behind the scenes. And you hear the whole room just go, "Oh man." And my brother goes, "Yes!" And I'm like, "Yeah." And some guy around behind us goes, "Why are you celebrating that?" And AJ goes, "My brother watches nothing but the damn behind the scenes." So sure enough, like the winning question that nobody got, I think people got 1, and I got all 4. Was they gave you 4 Star Wars planets, and you had to tell them what continent or what country, on Earth it was recorded on. Or filmed on. So it was like, obviously everybody knows Tunisia with Tatooine, but they had 3 others and people were like, what the hell? And I had them all. So yeah, I'm with, oh dude, please.
While we're off topic for a second here, I mean, there was that one, because I was watching on Disney Plus of like the making of with the Mandalorian, and I was watching all the little different things, but I tell you what, of all the episodes that were on for that, the one about the sound design and the scoring.
Yeah.
My favorite episode.
Yeah. All that stuff that I love that they're doing that on Disney Plus because it's like the shows are so damn good, and it's like you're speaking my language because it's like, okay, the show is so damn good, now we also get a behind the scenes of it, you just can't beat that. So
right. But yeah, then back to 84 before we leave this one. Since you were talking about Top Jimmy, I love the middle, the breakdown into the solo, how just the vibe changes, it just slows down and just gets chunky and. Before they go back and speed it back up again. That's like I love how they went and did that. It's like, oh, they slowed it down, just got real chunky. And, then he's just wailing around. And then, okay, we're going to slowly kind of start picking it back up again and going back to that high speed where we were. It was just, I love it.
Yep. Kale's talking about that too. He says, Top Jimmy is gold. It's strange that no one talks about it. There are some moments in that solo that he never really topped for me. Yeah, I mean, Kale, you're right. The solo is killer. And George, you bring up a great point because it's like it's basically like, they went back to that well on the 5150 album for the verses of the title track, 5150, and that's one of my all-time favorite Van Halen songs, for that reason. And that part, you're dead right when it goes into the solo, and Alex's drums like it's just, it's so guttural and tribal and big, and but like I said, the whole record is amazing, and it I mean, the hits notwithstanding, like I don't mind listening to Jump, and I think for me it's because that was where my little kid ear first discovered Van Halen,
right?
And I always have that feeling of holy shit. And then Panama just kicks it in. Then Top Jimmy, like I still get all the vibes that I got when I was 8 years old discovering the record, which is cool. Like
right.
The memories are so visceral. So I think that's why this record is always so enjoyable for me. Yeah. And even the quote unquote like low spots, of which there are barely any, like I'll wait. I'm sure people would say, okay, whatever. Some people
I
have
dig
heard
that
say,
tune.
dude, I love them all. It's like how do that's what I'm saying. It's like this record's like the songs on this record are like pizza. Even when it's bad, it's good. And there's not there's not a bad song on this album. And so Cale had he has a controversial take here. He says, my controversial take for this album is that I prefer the original demo of House of Pain from before the debut album. It tied in with Running with the Devil, and it was just a total banger. Have you heard the original version of this one?
Think I've heard. No, I don't think I had.
Okay. Yeah, Cale, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that one's able to be found on the Gene Simmons demo. Cale, I don't know which one I prefer because the one on the album is shorter. It's a little more concise. And it also, what I think is cool about this one, George, is it's kind of like the opposite of Top Jimmy, where it's fast and then a slow solo. But House of Pain is kind of like a slow jam, and then it gets into that boogie for the solo, which is cool. I love that aspect of it. But the album version's shorter, a little more concise. The Gene Simmons one is longer and kind of more all over the place, but it's got some really interesting stuff in there. So yeah, I mean, if you haven't heard that, George, just look up on YouTube, look up the Van Halen, the Gene Simmons demos.
Like I have homework after this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I want to hear that.
Yeah, and what's really cool is you'll hear a bunch of stuff that they pilfered on later records, including stuff like you get stuff for the next record that we're going to talk about, Different Kind of Truth. But yeah, I mean this record, man, I'm with you. This is like pretty much a perfect record, and oh man.
And I think it might be the last of the half-hour albums.
Yeah, well, I mean, because after this, you get into the Sammy stuff where
5150 was 43 minutes. So
yeah, well, I mean, after that, Eddie was free to kind of explore a different kind of songwriting. He was able to, he wasn't, Roth wanted these pop hits, and he wanted, the label was like, we got to have more. You Really Got Me. We got to have more Panama. Whatever. And he's like, nah, man, I'm just gonna write a shitload of good songs. And I mean, I think, and
I can only imagine what's in the archives that we haven't heard that are sitting in there.
Man, you know what? I don't know if you read that, but I love that they're finally remastering the Sammy records. I mean, that is so overdue. But then I think it was, Sammy that said it. I'm trying to remember if it was Sammy or Wolfgang. I'm pretty sure it was Sammy, that he said that there's actually some stuff in the vaults, and we've been told for years that there was not. That pretty much what you see
bullshit. As much as if you got your own studio, just like Vi and all these other guys, they have stuff that's in the vaults. I mean, I heard that Vi's had something that it was been sitting in the vaults that he didn't let out, but he's going to be, I think, releasing soon or release. I mean, these guys always have stuff in the vaults.
Yeah,
if you got your own home studio, you've got all kinds of stuff just sitting there.
I think they're probably referring to completed stuff. Because obviously, I mean, Eddie's famous for having like thousands of hours of just jamming. I mean, there's YouTube
Dude, I would dig an album like that, just like the one-offs, just like the demo sessions, Like I've had a couple albums that came out, they've re-released them, remastered it, and then give you a second disc of like all the demos.
Yeah. Oh,
Motley Crue one did that. I got to hear demos on that. Pantera did that with demos. It's like, oh wow, I'm like, you hear a totally different solo that Dime did, and you're like, well, I'm glad to see what he did, And I have I've had that with Metallica stuff too. You get the demos, I'm like, oh, you see where they, when he didn't even have lyrics, or just you have a different riff or a different solo, and to see where something came from is kind of cool too. Yeah,
I agree. Anthrax did that. I know, like the one that I really dug was the one for State of Euphoria, which is, I know, not everybody's favorite record, but I love it.
I love that album.
Yeah,
we started with fucking Charlie Benante. Okay,
dude, I wish, like, total side, like very quick side, I wish that album would have had better production, because it's the crappiest sounding of the early Joey stuff, and it's like, oh god, if that thing just sounded a little better. But so okay, Johan Alexanderson says that Vi released that album you're talking about earlier this year. He'd been holding on to it for 30 years, I think. Okay,
yeah. I think Ron was telling me about that album, so I wasn't sure if it was out yet or not.
And then I have to answer a Star Wars question. Cale, he says, where is Hoth on Earth? I'm sure you know this, but it is Norway. That was actually one of the countries, and surprisingly, not a lot of Star Wars nerds knew it. The other two, Cale, were where was Mustafar filmed, and where was Yavin 4 filmed? So let's see if you know those, Cale. And don't be Googling it either, because I didn't have a Google to use. I knew it off the top of my head. So, Kale, he says Metallica demos. Oh, you mean the Wa-na-na tracks?
Yes, yes.
I love that Het put those in there. Like the scratch vocal was just Wa-na-na-na-na. Like that was cool.
Yeah, it's funny because I always joke with my wife about that because like when we would play Guitar Hero, that's what she would do when she would sing along to a song. She didn't know the lyrics or whatever. And I go, you know what? I go, Metallica did that. And I play her one of the demos. I'm like, he did the same thing, when they couldn't figure out lyrics. So,
yep.
Yeah.
The trick is old as time, I guess. So. All right. Before we get to the next record to close out the show here, Kale, he has no idea of those two planets. So, Kale, Mustafar was Italy. They were filming the eruption of a volcano. And that was what a whole bunch of the background footage was of all the fire and all that crap. And then Yavin 4 was Guatemala. That's the one that really threw everybody for a loop. Everyone's like, really? Even my brother's like, how the hell did you know that? And I was like, well, I can't call myself a Star Wars nerd if I don't know stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
because you're a nerd.
I need my cred. So
right? You got that nerd cred.
So there it is. All right. So we go from 1984. We fast forward 28 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
God, really? It was 28 years?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I'll just say it flat out because this was my opinion on it when it came out, and I still stand by this. I think it's one of the best comeback records for a legacy band that I think I've ever heard. I was so nervous about it because it's like you don't want your favorite band to come out and just take a shit after, especially after all that time, and it's like, oh my God, like it had been 14 years since we got a record, and the one we got was Van Halen 3, which a lot of people could not stand. So you're just like, okay, what do we got? We knew Eddie cleaned
That's exactly
up,
my attitude when I went into it. I'm like, okay, what? It's like, all right. Like the hype was already over. I'm like, okay, what are we going to get here?
Yeah. Okay, so your initial reaction to A Different Kind of Truth.
Okay, so the way I saw it after listening to that, the initial reaction before I tell you the little story is that I heard Tattoo, and I'm like, this is kind of fucking corny, dude. I don't know if I want to hear the rest of this album. But,
I'm the only person on the planet who actually enjoyed
it. I was like, are they serious with this fucking song right now? I'm like, where's this going? Because you got the deal, you got the so you got the timelines. You got David Lee Roth era, then they get Sammy, so they split her off over here, and then you've got that little one-off, with Gary Sharon, and then to me when I listen to this album, it's like, okay, it sounded like where they picked up where they would have left off if this would have been like the next couple albums after 84.
Yeah.
Like if you never would have heard 5150, 0812 and all that, this is, some of the songs I hear are what I would imagine would have came after 1984.
Yeah.
But then, like I said, I remember the first time it came out because Ron's like, hey man, did you hear, Van Halen, they got David Lee Roth back. They did an album like, I don't know. I wasn't excited. So then he let me borrow it. And that's how I got the tracks again. I say, hey, I know you have this album. Like, so he Dropboxed them to me and I put them on my server so I can listen to them. Right. But yeah. Tattoo was just like, I mean, I don't know. It just, to me, it just comes off like it's just a corny song. Like, hey, let's just throw something out there. And I'm like, it just sounded corny to me. But after that, I mean, I listened to it and then I listened to it again today. I'm like, it's a good album. I dig Chinatown. I dig that fucking tune. And then, I had and Bullethead kind of made me a little chuckle. Just the fuck Bullethead. I'm like, all right, whatever. But
yeah, that's one of those really old ones.
Yeah,
that's
and then Stay Frosty. I for some reason I really dig Stay Frosty on there.
Well, I think I hate to correct you, but the song title you're looking for is Ice Cream Man, I believe. Sorry, Stay Frosty. That's my only complaint about that. I'm like, geez, Pete, could this be any more of a Ice Cream Man ripoff? Like,
right.
Like, hey, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm with you on Tattoo. Like, I have to admit, like, I liked the song when it came out, but my initial reaction, like right off the bat, I was like, oh boy, that's not what I was expecting. I was expecting like all guns blazing, and tons of people since have said they would have been much better off to use "She's the Woman" as the first single.
This shouldn't have been there. Yeah, this shouldn't have been the intro track for sure.
Yeah,
bury it down in the list a little bit, but yeah, that one shouldn't have been the one they came out swinging with.
Yeah, I think, but Yeah, see, Todd says it in the comments. He said, I actually love Tattoo, but She's the Woman should have been the single. Record would have been better received publicly. So, Todd, I was trying to think of that as I was listening to it today, and I wonder about the fact of the record being better received if they had released She's the Woman. And the reason is because that is a very strong song. Some people would argue the strongest on the record. And I wonder if some people would have thought that the rest of it was a letdown compared to She's the Woman. And also, I mean, Todd, you could speak to this. There are a lot of Roth honks out there that do nothing but bitch and moan about this record. It's all old stuff. All they did is rip off their old stuff. And like tons of us who've heard all the old demos and stuff like that, George, like She's the Woman is a very complete song from back in the day. And people would have gone, that's all they're doing is just rehashing the old shit. So, Todd, I really think there might have been some pretty serious backlash if She's the Woman had been the first single. Man, I wish I would love to have a time machine and change time and talk Van Halen to releasing She's the Woman as a single just to see what would have happened, you know?
Now, do you know the story about this album? I don't know what I mean, was it old shit that they had that they were waiting to put out? You know, how much of this album was old shit and how much of it was new, brand new when they got together with him?
I'm trying to think of the. It's Todd. I love it, man. You're speaking my language. He goes, I don't care. It was still a new Van fucking Halen album in 2012. I love everything about this record, dude.
See, that's how I felt when 3 came out. I'm like, hey, it's new Van Halen. I don't care if it's Carriage Throne. It's new Van Halen.
Yeah. I was in the same boat, dude. And I was a little disappointed, but I was like, okay, there's some good stuff. But yeah, I'm okay. So don't quote me on this because there's been a couple different like piles of facts about this, but Wolfgang has done a lot of talking about this recently, and he went through the album track by track. I think it was either for Van Halen News Desk or Guitar World or something. And I want to say, let me think. I know, so Tattoo, She's the Woman, Blood and Fire, Bullet Head, I think Out of Space, and one of either Big River or Beats Work, and I think those are the ones that were based off old material. I could be wrong on some of those
songs.
Yeah, well, I mean, but again, you know, fans that complain about that, it's like they did that all the time. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, they were doing that stuff constantly. So, you know, I mean, hell, even the song "Good Enough" on 5150 was a song called, I believe it's called "Donut City." For the Wildlife soundtrack, you know, if you go listen to that, it was, you know, you can hear that riff right there. All right, Kale says pretty sure it's Big River. Okay, yeah, okay, I thought so too, Kale, but I don't ever want to put something out there as if I 100% know if I don't. So, well, except for the fact that Hendrickson's wrong about this record, Brian, you stupid asshole. But yeah, so I mean, it is half stuff that they pulled from back in the catalog and reworked. But hey, you know, I mean, if you get like 6 old songs and 7 new ones, are you really complaining? Like Todd said, it's a new record and it sounds great. Eddie Van Halen's on goddamn fire on this record.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
if you're a fan of Eddie's playing, this is like porn. I mean, that's the first. After I got through the record the first time, I was like, holy shit, you know? And, you know, we get like super drop tune Eddie, which is cool because the only time I'd ever really heard that was on the outro to Fire in the Hole, which was awesome. But, you know, As Is and Honey Baby Sweetie Doll are, yeah, like, I mean, there's so many good songs on this, and it's, you know, I mean, Roth is totally camped up, obviously, but the lyrics are pretty thoughtful, which is cool. I mentioned a song earlier that I kind of felt like reminded me of Hear About It Later, that's on this record, and it's You and Your Blues, track 3. I love that song so goddamn much. And I think they would have played it live if it wasn't Roth like just screaming at the highest possible register he can, you know, for that chorus, because they were like, "There's no way this guy's gonna hit this shit live." That is like such a classic Van Halen, like upbeat, fun riff. You know, the groove is bouncing, and you know, and then you get the chorus, like those classic harmonies, like you know, like that big like Van Halen backing vocal to it. And I mean, this record, man, I'm with you. This is a great album. And a bunch of my friends, you know, who are Van Halen fans, they're not really into it, and I don't understand it. I
So
don't
what do you
understand.
think? I mean, what do you think they'll shit on more, this or 3?
That's a good question. It's kind of mixed. It's kind of mixed because some of my friends, you know, they're strictly the Roth guys, so they're gonna take this one over the Sharon one. But then there are some of them that are like, oh, it's half old stuff. This is crap, you know. I think my friends generally tend to side more with this one, just because, you know, 3 was really out there. I mean, it's that one really eclectic record that you're kind of like, you know, especially when you get into a song like Once, I'm like, what the fuck is this? I mean,
so here's my take. Like I said, we had those little branches. So, you know, you got the early Roth era stuff. That's, you know, the lounge singer party guy. Then you go into the Sammy stuff, which is just straight up front rock. We're not bullshitting here, you know, and he's got his own energy. I think when 3 came out, to me, when I listened to 3, because I know where I was at when I heard that, and when I was like, I mean, listening to the mix and how full it was, and to me, it came off as a more like emotionally charged album, just because of the way that Sharon sings.
Yeah,
it had a totally different vibe. It had like, he's got so much emotions behind it, and then we come back out with that last album, and it's like, okay, here comes the party band. They're back. You know, they got Roth back, and now we're back to party mode. You know, so that's how I saw the different generations of it. You know, we got the party, then we got we're not fucking around, we're straight up rock, melt your face. Then okay, we'll give you some like rock with some emotion, and then we're back to the party guys again. But I mean, I love that last I would consider that the other day when I listened to this last album, pretty much my first time listening, because the only thing I had remembered was Tattoo. You know, and so then I got to listen to, I'm like, okay, but I can tell that this is going to be an album that I'm going to have to listen to a couple times. It's going to grow on me, because then when I listen to it again today, I'm like, yeah, dude, this is a really good album. So it's like, I'm going to have to listen to a few more times, and it's going to be, it's going to end up sticking to me, because like out of all the albums, it's probably the one that I listened to the absolute least, because I just, when I said I heard Tattoo, I'm like, I just didn't give the album a chance the first time it came out. As, hearing that, and then you can kind of hear it in that first song, in Tattoo, like where he's almost kind of struggling to hit that, hit the high notes. Like he almost sounds winded.
Yeah.
In spots. I'm like, wow, like he sounded like he did in some of the live stuff when he's kind of trying to run around and try to sing. I'm like, yeah, you don't still have it. I mean, you're good, but you still don't,
Yeah. Know your limits, bro.
Right. Right.
So Kale asks, did they only ever play it, that being You and Your Blues, for the acoustic DVD? I thought they would have played this live for sure. No, this I've looked into it, dude, and You and Your Blues was only ever done on that acoustic DVD that came with the deluxe version of the album. That was what they called it, the Downtown Sessions. So yeah, unfortunately they didn't do it live, but yeah, I mean this is just such a great return to form, and I think it's to be honest, I think the record should have ended after Stay Frosty. Big River and Beats Workin' to me are kind of okay. Well, too many. Mm-hmm. They're kind of, those are the songs I'd be like, yeah, whatever, on this record. But I was thinking today, and it's kind of funny.
It's almost twice as long as all the other albums,
Oh, well, yeah.
50 minutes.
Well, I mean, dude, Beats Workin' is 5 minutes long. I mean, there are only 1, 2, 3 songs under 3 minutes, and the rest of them are usually about the 4.5. But it was kind of interesting to me. Like, I was getting kind of emotional listening to it today. When it gets to the end of the record, the end of Beats Workin', and I was like, man, this would be the if you would have told me in 2012 that this would be the last recorded thing I'd ever hear Eddie Van Halen do, I'd be like, really, seriously? And it's interesting to me that the final lyric is that beats working, baby, and it's like that kind of encapsulates, like, it's kind of like you could see somebody seeing that when they retire from a music career or like a sports career or something. You look back and go, well, that beat working, like it's. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, it obviously wasn't intended to be such, but I thought it was kind of an interesting sentiment that, to end Van Halen's recorded career on. And
yeah, I never looked at it that. I never. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, that's the last thing that he did. So with Van Halen,
yeah. It was really sad, because when I really realized it, I was like, I was again, I was getting emotional because I'm such an enormous Eddie Van Halen guy. But yeah, again, I think this was everything I could have hoped for and more. I just, I when I bought the record, I was like, okay, Tattoo, I know this one. Let's see what comes next. And then She's the Woman comes on. I was like, oh, goddamn. All right, now we're talking. And then I get to You and Your Blues, which, as I said, I love. I was like, this song is great. And then you go to Chinatown, your jam, and I was like, oh my God, what is this? Like, and then Blood and Fire is like a totally different vibe, but it's like that upbeat kind of, little guitars, like kind of thing. And, then Bullet Head's just a classic old school rocker. Then, let's say As Is and Honey Baby Sweetie Doll, those two really heavy new tracks. Oh my God. It's just so cool, man. Like to hear that, just that heavy, gug. That Eddie Van Halen chugging is just like,
right.
Holy shit, man. So, yeah, this is such an underrated album to me. And my co-host Brian hates it. I'm going to talk about this on the show sometimes. It's like, you're wrong. You're just plain out fucking wrong. This is a great album. So,
right. Let me jump back real quick because I know that you got a hold of that Live Right Here Right Now album.
Yes, I did.
When I was out on Record Store Day, I was looking for that. I couldn't find it, but I know that it's remastered. And I know a lot of times when people like say, "Oh, it's been," there's a difference between remix and remastered. Did you notice a difference? Okay, from the original recording to the remastered recording, or do you not have a turntable? I'm gonna smack the shit out of you if you don't have one.
I have a turntable. It's not mine. My wife has one because she listens to stuff on vinyl. I do not. And when I buy my vinyl, I keep it sealed. I'm kind of an idiot like that. I buy them as like a...
Yeah, you're that toy collector. It's never been out of the box.
Well, well, it's not quite that because I'm not like... Although, admittedly, if the guy had a second one, I was going to buy a second one of that. And
that thing was not cheap.
Well, it was $100. It was $99.99. Yeah, and I was going to buy it just to let it appreciate. I'm like, I could buy some serious shit with this. Like, depending on when they put out the other remastered records, I could buy the rest of them with that, that one live album. But yeah, no, I actually keep them in the packaging, just not because I'm trying to collect or anything. I like them pristine, and I have them framed on my walls. So anything I have, I just like it to be like in pristine condition. And
well, I was curious if you listen, because I know sometimes they do these remasters. Sometimes it's like a money grab. Like, yeah, you really don't hear a difference. The only one I heard a difference on was when they redid 9 Inch Nails.
Okay,
when they came out with that remastered edition of a Pretty Hate Machine.
Okay,
I know that was the only way I've ever, like, it's sonically. I listened to it, I'm like, yeah, no, I hear a difference, and it's really awesome, but. Some of the other stuff, like, well, what did they do? Like, did they really do anything?
I know that the 2015 remasters they did on the Roth catalog, and
that's what they have on Spotify is the 2015 remasters, which I'm like, okay.
They're definitely a little bit louder. I think they're a little bit cleaner. I honestly think if they do it right, I mean the real differences that we're going to hear is going to be on the Sammy catalog, because when you put those things on, man, 5150 and OU812 are quiet albums. So there's a lot of room for improvement on those. But yeah, I've read reviews from people that have actually listened to the remaster, and they say it's pretty good. They said it's, as a remaster as it goes, it's good. It's a little more crisp, and it definitely like boosts the volume a little bit, and just sounds a little more spacious. So, but again, unfortunately, sorry to burst your bubble there. I did. That's all right. So, yeah. All right, Kale. So before we get out of here, we can talk a little bit more Van Halen. We'll hit on a little bit of Sammy, because that's the stuff that George is really familiar with. Me as well, obviously. Kale says, I was saving up my better takes for the hot takes with the Hagar era, and we didn't go there. I'll hit you up later with those, and then probably get blocked. All right, Kale. Give me a hot take about the Hagar era before we jump ship here for the night. What is your Sammy Hagar hot take? If this is really bad, yeah, you're risking getting banned from the chat here. That's our show joke, George. Anytime someone's like really disagreeing with me in particular, we'll just joke like, you're gonna get banned from the chat. Like, so, but yeah, Kale definitely is good for a couple shitty takes per show. But he's also our first listener ever and viewer, and so he's a very good friend. But while he's typing up his hot take, here he goes. All right, y'all ready for this? Yes, Kale. We said we were ready. So unless you're writing a novel, let's do this.
Hot take or hot steamy turd?
I don't know if he's gonna shit on Sammy Hagar. I think It's going to be a turd, I think. I mean, speaking of that, I mean, Todd Gatchell said it somewhere up in the chat, but he was talking about the difference between, trying to see if I can scroll up and find it. He was talking about the difference between the Roth and because here it is. Yeah, he said, I appreciate Eddie Van Halen's work, but that magic with Roth is tangible. But as of late, I've been giving a nod to the Sammy stuff and listening more, but still with those lyrics of his, he's not a Sammy lyricist fan. He says, yes, he torches Roth's vocal abilities. And I think, yeah, that's the one thing that I will say, and I always make this argument to people that just completely shit on the Sammy stuff, like he sucks, and they call him spammy and fat, Ronald McDonald, all this other crap. Like, it's like, dude, if you, and I'm sorry, people call this gatekeeping. I don't give a shit. I can do whatever I want. It's my show. I've always felt that if you're going to disregard half of Eddie Van Halen's catalog, you can't call yourself a Van Halen fan. I'm sorry. Like, I don't like Roth singing, but that didn't mean I went to see him live. I didn't go to, I boycotted the live shows. Like, no, I'm going to go see him live.
And I've never got to see them with Roth. I only saw him with Sammy, and that was on the Balance tour.
It was, yeah, I saw all the tours, and in 2007 he was fine. 2010 you could see he was kind of eh. And then we actually went to the opening night of the entire tour for A Different Kind of Truth in 2012. We went to the Yum Center in Louisville, Kentucky. And he sounded good. I mean, it was his first night of the tour, so you'd expect he's fresh and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very pleasantly surprised. But after that, when I saw him on subsequent, like I saw him at the Rock USA Festival in Oshkosh, Wisconsin in 2013, he was terrible. And I was drunk off my ass, and I could still tell he was terrible, so let that tell you something. And then I saw him in 2015, and he was terrible. And obviously all this stuff, from the music awards and Jimmy Kimmel and all that, like he just... How anybody could listen to what he was doing and go, yeah, this Ross still got it. Like it's like, no, he doesn't. He's ugh. So all right, let's get to Kale's take, and then we'll sign off for tonight. He says his hot take is, I've never been a fan of Cabo Wabo. Okay, yeah, that's kind of a turd, Kale. That's a great song. He says there are a lot. Excuse me. There are a lot of way better songs from the Hagar albums. I'll take Mine All Mine. That one I'll give you. Source of Infection. Oh, dude. I love Source of Infection. Don't get me wrong. But over Cabo Wabo, no. Feels So Good. So he'd take all those three songs off of OU812 over Cabo Wabo. Okay, Mine All Mine I'll give you. Source of Infection, no, but I love that song. OU812 is like a guilty pleasure album for me. I don't know about you, but I just think it's criminally underrated. Feels So Good. I will say no, but I do love that song as well. But man, dude, how do you not like Cabo Wabo? Is that even possible, George? Like what? Oh my God!
It's a great tune.
It's
a great tune.
It's kind of a throwback. It's got that slower kind of, drop dead legs kind of groove to it.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it's got that drop dead legs feel to it. He's got some really, and Alex has got some really cool like syncopation going on in that, just like, just holding back and then
It's got great Michael Anthony harmonies in it. It's got a great solo. I mean, what's not to like, Kale? Good Lord. All right, his last take is, I'd actually take the Red album with the rude acronym. Excuse me, Kale, it's not rude. It's For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. That is the album title. He said, I'll actually take For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge over 5150 or 812. There are a lot of fans that will not disagree with you on that. I got asked the other night, George, what my favorite Van Halen record is, and I still don't know the answer. So if you had to pick a favorite Van Halen record, are you able to do it?
1984, hands down, for me.
All right, well, that's good. You have an obvious answer.
Yeah.
See, for me, it's kind of like, it's difficult because 1984 is the most influential record of my life. For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, I absolutely wore out in 1991.
Oh, I loved that album. When it came out, forget it. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. And for me, OU812 is like, again, it's a guilty pleasure. I think it's like really underrated, and I really love a lot of the songs. But that being said, like, I could tell you why I love Balance. I could tell you why I love 5150. The Roth stuff I think would be a little bit easier because obviously Fair Warning and 1984 are at the top of those for me. But man, it's just it's difficult, man, because again, it's my favorite band, and I just love them, dude. So, well, anyways, man, that was a blast. Thank you for jumping on 2 days' notice. I appreciate it. That was
the planets all aligned, so it all worked out.
I know, right? Thankfully, your computer decided to agree about 60 seconds before we went live. That was good.
Yeah.
I was preparing to filibuster on Van Halen until your stuff started working. It was
but come on. I mean, I even got everything running early to make sure I got online. It's like, nope. Come on.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, I should have worn my Sammy shirt, just,
There it is. But the Dream Theater show is more appropriate for this particular
that's
podcast.
what I think. When I realized that which podcast you were having, I said, well, okay, I'm going to wear my Dream Theater shirt, This is more appropriate.
So before I do my outro here, I have to ask you your opinion on the band we're going to be talking about in our next episode. What do you think about Sons of Apollo?
I don't have a lot of experience with them. I mean, I know more so of, Winery Dogs than anything, but Sons of Apollo, I dig them. I just don't. I wouldn't say that I'm well versed with them.
Time to dive into them, man. You only have 3 records, so that's good. The 2 studio records and the live one. So there you go. But so yeah, guys, that's gonna do it again for another episode of Talking Into Infinity. George, thank you so much again for making time and coming on the show. It was a blast. I really appreciate all your awesome insight into Van Halen. That was really cool. Guys, we will be back here in 2 weeks. It will be Thursday, June 15th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and hopefully we're back on the CMS network at that time if Aiken doesn't get himself dinged again. That night, we are going to be doing our album deep dive into the debut record by Sons of Apollo, Psychotic Symphony. That's what we were going to do tonight, but Brian had to go play hockey. So tune in for that one. Again, Facebook, YouTube, talkingintoinfinity.com, and the CMS network. .com. To all you guys in the chat tonight, Kale McLeish, Todd Gatchell, man, Johan Alexanderson, Logan Brannigan, thank you guys so much for taking part in the show. Appreciate all y'all. And we will see you guys on June 15th. And until then, everybody, as usual, Carpe Diem.